Hello, Professor, and welcome to this demo. So here we're going to demonstrate how to use Azure Cosmos DB, which is an offering by Microsoft. Okay. So what we're going to do is, so we'll be using the Azure command line to create a document DB server. Okay, and then we'll create a database, a document DB database on that server. Okay. Once we've done that, we will be using Microsoft's client SDK to work with that database, and Microsoft offers their client SDK to work with document DB in or Cosmos DB to work with it in multiple languages. So they have an SDK for Java, they have an SDK for Python, for C Sharp, and so on and so forth, and for Node.js also. So we'll be using the SDK for C Sharp. In order to create this Cosmos DB database online, first thing we need to do is we need to create a Cosmos DB server. Okay, so we're gonna have to create the server online, and then we'll create the database on the server. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do here. First, I'm gonna create this Cosmos DB server, and this is the command that you can see on my screen here. That is the command to create this Cosmos DB server. Okay, and so over here, what you do, we have to specify multiple parameters over here, obviously. So when you're saying AZ, that essentially means you're using the Azure command line. Okay, I've already installed the Azure command line on my machine here, so I can just use it. And now when you create, so when you're saying Cosmos DB, that means you're working with Cosmos DB. Create means create. That's that you're creating the Cosmos DB account or the Cosmos DB server, and then you have to indicate the resource group. So the way Azure works is everything in Azure is treated as a resource, and resources are grouped into what is referred to as a resource group. So even this Cosmos DB server that we create or Cosmos DB account that we create on Azure, it is treated as a resource, and so it has to be present in a resource group. And so yeah, that's why we need a resource group. So which means we have to create a resource group, and I have already created a resource group beforehand, and the name of that resource group is my resource group. I did that by using this command, and I already did that before, and so you can see that over here that I've created that resource group here. So that's this resource group, and now what we're going to do is we're going to create this Cosmos DB server in that resource group. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. And so that's this command. So we've indicated the resource group, and now we need to indicate the name of that Cosmos DB account. Let's call it my name or whatever, right? And there's that, and then so you have to indicate the type, and then you have to indicate where it's deployed. So we're saying we want to deploy it in North Central US, and yeah, I think okay, so I think we don't need this command. I think that's okay. So this is the command that we're going to use. Okay, we're not going to use that others. Okay, so we're going to go here, and let me just clear the screen. Okay, so I'm going to clear the screen. Okay, now I'm going to execute this command. Okay, so the command that I copied over here, I'm going to put that on the command line here and execute it. Okay, so let's go ahead and hit enter, and yeah, and let's wait for Azure to create the Cosmos DB account for us. It's taking forever. Yeah, well, just wait. There you go. So okay, so there you go. So Azure has created the Cosmos DB server for us. Now, so we've created a Cosmos DB server. The next thing we need to do is we need to create a database in that server, right? So we can once again, we can create the database by using the portal. We can create the database by using the Azure CLI, or we can create the database by using the Microsoft SDK. We're gonna no, because we already demonstrated creating the Cosmos DB server or Cosmos DB account by using the Azure CLI. We're gonna demonstrate creating the database by using the Azure portal. Okay, so that's what we're gonna do. So we're here. So now I'm going to click Rahul because I want to go to this Azure Cosmos DB server, and so I'm going to this account. Okay, I'm going to this server, going to this account. So it's going to take some time, and then it's going to show me everything. There you go. So that's my Azure Cosmos DB account, Cosmos DB server, same thing. Okay, so that's where I am. I'm looking at the overview over here. So there's many properties over here. As you can see, Data Explorer allows us to see all the data that's present. So you can see all your database, and you can see the tables in the databases, etc. Oh, by the way, in Azure, the terminology is every table is actually referred to as a collection. Okay, and every row in the table is referred to as a document. So that's the idea. So when they're saying collections, think of it as tables. Okay, all right, so let's do that. So first we need to do is we need to create a collection. Okay, collection. Okay, so first thing we need to do is, like I said, every collection has to belong to a database, right? Right, because one database will have multiple collections. That's the idea, just like SQL, right? So because we need a database and then we need tables. So over here we're going to have a database, and the database is going to have multiple collections. Think of collections as tables, and every collection is going to have JSON documents. Okay, so that's the idea. So now we're going to create a database. Let's call the name of the database water database, and then we're going to specify the name of the collection. This is like saying I'm going to specify the name of the table, or let's call it let's call it water collection. So let's just set it to city. Okay, city. Okay, whatever, sure. Yeah, now we're gonna go and we created the database. We're gonna create a collection. There you go. Oh, there you go. So we've created this database. As you can see, now we've created this collection also. Now we need to add documents to this collection, right? So now what I'm gonna do is you can go here and click new document. Okay, Okay, and so the ID is essentially used to uniquely identify every document. Because we're creating this document ourselves, we need to specify what the ID is. Okay, we're gonna call it one. Can be anything. Okay, and then no. So by the way, we're creating the this database is gonna contain information about voters, right? So let's create first name. Okay, uh, Rahul. Okay, now we use the partition key as city, right? City, Tacoma. Okay, so we did that, and now let's hit save. And there you go. So we have created this document in this collection in this database successfully. So there you go. That's our document, right? All right. So we've created this collection over here. Now I'll demonstrate how we can use SQL queries to actually query this information and using this Azure portal over here. Now before we do that, let me create another document over here. Okay. Um, just so I can demonstrate how it works. So I'm going to go here. I'm going to create another document over here. So I've created two documents, hit save. Everything looks good. Now I'll show you how to use SQL queries. Now we'll show you how to use SQL queries in the Azure portal, right? So there's this thing, new SQL query. We can go there. And now what we can do is if we do select star, actually, I don't know why this is so, I wish I could move it here, but anyway, let's do this, and there you go. Yeah. So if you do select star from C, hit execute, it should display both the documents to us, and it does, which is great. Now if I wanted to say, give me only the person with the ID 2 or ID 1, I think I didn't c.id equals 1 because that's what ID is here, so that's how it should be. There you go. So that's the thing. So I got so I'm getting the information about the first person or person of ID 1. Now if I wanted to query people based on their first name, then I would say or the city, then I would say city equals Los Angeles, and if I hit that, then it should show me Arnold, because that's the case. It doesn't show the other document with my first name because the city for that was Tacoma, right? And so now if I did select c.first name, so that's projection. So if you do c.first name, SQL query projection, so it'll only display the first name. If I could do select star from C, which means it'll show me only the first name for everything. So that's good. So there's that. And obviously you can perform more complex queries over here, but we're not going to go into all that because we just want to focus on the basics of the offering that Microsoft has for us over here. So there's that. Now we've demonstrated what? Now we use the Azure command line to create this document DB account or Cosmos DB account. Then we use the Azure portal to create a collection and a database over here. And then we executed simple SQL queries over here to demonstrate, how this works using the Azure portal. Now, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to be using the Microsoft C# SDK to insert a document in this collection and then execute a get query to get this document from this collection. So how do we do that? So okay, so before we do that, let me go ahead and actually delete these documents that I just created here for the purpose of demonstrating the SQL query and the Azure portal here. That's because the documents that we insert using the Microsoft C# SDK, we will be inserting information about voters, but they'll have additional properties. So I don't want two documents having a different set of properties to mix, and this is just for demoing the SQL queries over here. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these documents. Now to delete the document, you can simply hit click delete. Click delete, and there you go. We have deleted both the documents. Now another way you can if you wanted to delete multiple documents. Now to do that, what we can do is we can write a stored procedure here. I'm not going to go over that because we just want to keep the demo short, but the idea is a stored procedure over here is something like you write that in JavaScript, and then you can execute a delete operation on multiple documents. So there's that. Yes. Okay. So now we want to demonstrate using the Microsoft C# SDK to work with Azure Cosmos DB. So we've created this console application here. For this console application, we have installed the Microsoft C# SDK to work with Azure Cosmos DB. So if I right click and go to, and now it's not working, and my machine, yeah, there you go, right click and go to manage NuGet packages, and we should see Microsoft Azure Document DB, yeah, there you go. So it's right there. So that's the SDK that we need to work with Azure Cosmos DB. So we've already installed that, and we've already written this code over here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a person document in the collection that we created using the Azure portal, right, by using the Azure C# SDK. Okay, so first we specify the endpoint URL, which is the endpoint of the Azure Cosmos DB, and then we specify the primary key, which is again the key of the Azure Cosmos DB account that we created, and we can get this key from the Azure portal. So if we go here, if we go, this is our Azure portal, right? And then if we go to the keys, so we should see that this is our key right here, and that's the key that we've specified over there. Okay, so there's that, and now we create an instance of the document client, and that class is available to us because we have installed the Microsoft Azure SDK, or the Document DB SDK in our console application. We're creating an instance of the client by specifying the endpoint and the key, and then we create an instance of the person class that we want to insert. So we specify the name of the database and collection, and then we call the document async method, client create document async method, specifying the name of the database, the name of the collection, and then the person instance that we want to create. Okay, then, and yeah, you can ignore this method, write to console and prompt to continue, because that's just a method I wrote to display output. And now we'll call this method, we'll run this method, we'll call this method from main. And now if this method succeeds, then in the Azure portal we should see that a document has been created, with the with this ID and this, all these properties representing this person, and we'll specify the database collection. Okay, yeah, everything's good. So now let's hit play, and yeah. Okay, so we're running this console application now. And there you go. So we've created a person of ID that. Hit and any key to continue. Now if we go to the Azure portal, there you go. So if we go here, if we go to documents, we should be able to see that a document has been created for us. There you go. So that's the document. So there you go. So that's the ID, and these are the properties that we indicated in our code over here. So there you go. So it has worked. Now the next thing we need to do is we would like to use the C# SDK to execute a GET request to get the document. So we've written the code for that here as well. So first let me comment this out because we don't want to run this method anymore, and we're gonna run this method, run simple query. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what that method looks like. Again, we specify the endpoint and the key. We create an instance of the document client, specify the database name and collection name, and yeah. So when we're doing all this, we also there's something called feed options. So essentially, what we're doing is when we want to execute a query, we need to specify additional query options, right? Things, yeah, that we so it's like settings for executing a query. So we're specifying the max item count to -1. So max item count allows us to specify how many responses should be returned, right? And that allows us to control the amount of throughput, right? The amount of bandwidth and the amount of throughput. And why that's important is because you get in Azure Cosmos DB, you get charged based on your throughput. So and so by specifying this max item count to a certain value, that allows you to limit that throughput. So so that allows you to limit how much your costs and all that. And we have set it to -1 because we're saying, hey, just give us everything. And in our case, there's only one document, so it's fine. And then the partition key. So that's another thing. So if you remember, when we created the collection, we went over the concept of partition key, and we created a partition key with setting it to city. So what's going to happen is Azure Cosmos DB, it's used the value of the city property to create. When we insert documents in Azure Cosmos DB, it's going to use the value of the city property to partition these documents, right? And so when you're executing queries, then you have to specify that partition key. Now I know it doesn't like because we only have one document in the collection. You might be wondering why do we need to specify the partition key, because there's just one document. I get that, but the idea is that what if you had like millions of documents, right? What if so like in our voter registration system, like you're using it to represent what all the voters of say if you're using it to represent all the voters of the country, right? Then in that case, using the partition key of state would be awesome, because then the documents would be divided based on the value of the state, right? So that way you can get to people that belong to a certain state faster, right? And so if you're looking at if you wanted to create a voter registration system for a complete state, say like that. So obviously the partition key that we use, the property that we use as a partition key depends on the usage of the usage of the application, the usage of the database, and the types of queries that we're going to be executing against the database. So that's a different concept in itself, but obviously that's beyond the scope of this demo, because we're just demonstrating how to use the Azure technology over here to work with Cosmos DB. So let's just focus on that. So okay, so now we've specified the query options, specifying the max item count and partition key. We've created a document client, and now we want to execute a document query, right? And now let's go over this line of statement, right? So we're saying person. What this means is when you execute this query, whatever you get in response, you should deserialize that to an instance of type person, right? So if you recall, when we created a document, right, what we did was we created an instance of the person class, right? And so if you wanted to see that, so that's like here. So we defined this person class, and now we're saying that, hey, when you get the responses, deserialize that to person. Okay, so we're doing that, and then we're saying, so create a document query, deserialize to person, and then we'll do it against this collection of this URI. So we're creating a URI for this collection, and this is the name of the database. This is the name of the collection that belongs to that database, right? And these are the query options, right? So this will create a URI for us, Okay, and and then we're saying, okay, once you create this query, and no, sorry, so create this query for this database and collection, and what should that query include? It involves executing this function. Okay, and so think about it like this. It's basically using LINQ over here. So LINQ is like a concept that applies to Microsoft .NET languages. So I'm not going to go much over that, but the idea over here is basically for for every document, this function is executed, and this function will return true or false. If it returns true or false, and this for every document is passed as input. So this function is executed once for every document. Every document where the last name is Schwarzenegger, this function will return true. Otherwise, it will return false. So what this query is doing is it's going to give us all the documents where the last name is Schwarzenegger. Okay, by using this function over here. And now in our collection, we only have one document, so it should only return to us the document that we just created, right? So it should only return to us one document where the last name is Schwarzenegger. Okay, so there you go, there's that. And so this is that query. And now so this line of code returns to us a I variable of type person. So that is the person query variable, and now we need to execute the query. And now this is again a concept of iteration and I enumerables and I queryable in C#. I'm not going to go much into that, but the I'm just going to say that, hey, if you call toList, then that query is executed and you'll get the response. And when we call toList, we get a list of voters, and then we go, and in this code over here, we go over each and every voter, and then we display their first name and last name. Okay, and so yeah, so if this method runs successfully, if this code works properly, then we should be able to see the first name and last name of the person. Okay, last name is already there, but anyway, first name, and you can say city if you wanted. City. Yeah, a city of the person with the last name of Schwarzenegger, right? Of every person with the last name of Schwarzenegger. Actually, there's only one because our collection only has one such document. Okay, so now we're going to call this method run simple query. We're already calling it over here, and everything else has been commented out, so main will only execute that method. So now I'm going to say, why? Because we said that when you, for every document that you get, you should display the first name and the city. So there's only one document where the last name is Schwarzenegger and the name over there is Arnold, and the city is Los Angeles. So this has worked. There you go. So that has worked. So we were able to use the C# SDK to execute a query to get a document. Now there's another way you can execute a query. What you can do is you can directly send a SQL statement from C# onto Azure Cosmos DB to execute that statement and then get the response. So let's look at that. So that's another way to execute queries against Azure Cosmos DB by using C#. So that's this method right here. So okay, let's go with this method. We specify the endpoint and the primary key as always. Create an instance of the document client. So all this is essentially the same. Okay, so yeah, once again you have to specify the query options that will be used to execute the query that we send over to Azure Cosmos DB, specifying the partition key and the max item count. And then we're saying, okay, now we say once again create document query, but this time notice that unlike before, so before what did we do? We said, hey, do this, right, where f dot last name is this, but now we're not going to do that. So this stuff is going to stay the same, this highlighted part, but now after that we're going to say execute this query. So this is, we're going to send this over saying, hey, select star from C where C dot county is Hollywood. So now what we're saying is, with this line of statement, this line of code is that send this query to Azure Cosmos DB, execute it, and for every response you get, deserialize every response to an instance of person. So that's what it's going to do. Now we can replace this with anything. This can be any SQL query that works. Okay. Yeah, and actually, and yeah. So there you go. There's that. And yeah, and if the query you can execute something like, yeah. So there's that, and now we're gonna say run SQL query directly. Boom, boom, boom. And if this works, then we should see the first name and last name of every such person. Actually, we can, yeah. So we should see the first name and last name of every person who's in Hollywood. Now, as you recall, in the beginning, we created a document. The first name was Arnold, last name was Schwarzenegger, and this county was Hollywood. So we should get that document, and we should see Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay. So I'm going to call this method from run SQL query. There you go. Okay, I'm going to call this, and now as you can see, if I go to Azure over here, there's this document, Arnold Schwarzenegger, county is Hollywood. So this is the document with county of Hollywood. So if this works, I should see Arnold Schwarzenegger. Okay, so I'm going to hit play. All right, let's see. There you go, read Arnold Los Angeles. So it has worked. So we executed the query successfully, and so that's why I displayed the first name and the name of the city, because that's what we displayed over there. And so this has worked successfully. So what did we do in this demo? First, we used the Azure CLI to create an Azure Cosmos DB account on Azure. Then we use the Azure portal to create a database and a collection on that Azure Cosmos DB account. We demonstrated how we can use the Azure portal to execute SQL queries against our data in the collection in the database on Azure Cosmos DB. Then we demonstrated how we can use the Microsoft C# SDK to insert data or to add data to a collection in a database in Azure Cosmos DB and then get the data as well.